So yeah, we were talking about our favorite Christmas movies, guys.
I don't think there's one better than Home Alone. That's probably the only one I absolutely love.
No.
There's always the argument of whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. I think it's heavily favored that it is, in fact, a Christmas movie.
I put it on my list for Christmas, definitely.
I'll go with it.
My family's been stuck on the Hallmarks and the Netflix and all that fun stuff, and there's some good ones.
I live in St. Pete, Florida. The Harry Connick was a Christmas film just a few blocks down from my place, and I ran into him. He's a very handsome man, but he's a little bit shorter than you would think.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Fun fact. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
You know, these days, like I'm watching like so many of those movies, I don't even remember the name because, you know, how the way Netflix operates is like one movie starts, then the other starts right after, right? Like when you're getting a drink or something, like the second movie has started. So yeah, but I do enjoy those feel-good movies. So.
Yeah. I'm about the fake fire on the fireplace. Just let that go with the music, even though I do have a fireplace. We'll have that going.
If that's the one on the television on a loop, you can actually, if you stare at it long enough, you'll loops.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think YouTube has like a 4-hour, 12-hour like video of the fireplaces. I think we have a kitchen TV. I have the Apple TV app running on it with the fireplace, and with the sound and everything. But yeah.
I'm in the Northeast, and one of the big things that they do is they film a lot of those Lifetime and whatever other channel, and so people love to go and be extras, you know, around the New England town greens and everything. And they filmed a couple in my town, and a couple of towns over, and it's funny to watch the locals come out to try to get into those things.
So
well, I think it's going to be very Christmassy here in Denver this year. We have not had any snow. At least in the city for the entire, well, I think this is the longest period of time since sometime in the 1800s that we have not had snow before or in October. So not going to be super Christmassy here apparently, but we do have enough in the mountains. So there's enough to get up there. Nice.
Yeah, in the Bay Area, like it kind of snows maybe once in like 8 years, and we get to see it like far up, right, in the hills, and like people drive up and have accidents because they're not used to the snows.
We still have accidents when we drive in the snow here. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I grew up in Virginia, right, on the East Coast, so that kind of snow is like very different from where we are right now in the Bay Area. But Virginia did not have their own snow equipment for the longest time. We used to like borrow from like New York, right? So it's like, again, a lot of like off days because of snow. All right, I think we can get started. I think people are like trickling in, right? So, so I am Dickie Singh. I'm your host. And then we are so grateful that we have you here. Thank you for joining us, making time for this topic. Can customer success be a successful loss leader? If you have been following our webinars, we tend to go a little bit deeper into the topics that we pick. But let me get some housekeeping items out of the way. This webinar will be recorded, and everyone who has registered will receive the recording via email. And of course, we will be putting it on our website at cast.app. And we encourage you to use the Q&A box for questions. These will be answered during and after the discussion, depending on how much time we have. So we have a lot of brain power here today. So in alphabetical order, like Amelia from Growth Molecules, Graham from Maestro, Jeff Heckler from MarketSource, and Ronnie from Zoom. So panelists, please introduce yourself and your work. Tell us one thing that you do for fun, and where are you going for your next vacation? Amelia.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Amelia. I'm from Growth Molecules. I'm a customer success consultant. And what do I do for fun? Well, I live in the mountains, so anything outdoors. I think I've mentioned this before on some webinars, but I own a dozen chickens. So they keep me entertained because they free range. So that's always fun. And then where am I going on my next vacation? I'm going to New York this weekend. It's for work, but I will be doing plenty of shopping and enjoying not having children or animals around me, just city life. So I'm excited.
Nice, thank you. I think Graham, you're up next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Graham Gill from Maestro, Vice President of Customer Success. When I'm not working or playing with the kids, I coach hockey. I coach at the local high school as well as a national bound girls team that I really am excited about. We're doing well this year. Nothing exciting for vacation. Probably just end up down in Florida visiting some family, getting some sun. I'm starting to get a little pale, so looking forward to getting some warmth.
That's interesting. My daughter played field hockey for the longest time. I think she grew out of that. But Jeff, you're next.
Jeff Heckler, Customer Success Solutions. I'm director thereof at Market Source, all things customer success end to end for our Fortune 500 customers. For fun, after this, I'll be hitting the water slides on a semi-work vacation here at the in the greater Orlando area. Some meetings and stuff like that. And I will elbow my way into some water slide fun today.
I want to thank you, Jeff, for joining into the last minute. Much appreciated. And then last but not least, Ronnie.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Ronnie Gahn. I currently am an enterprise CSM at Zoom. I am on the, what do they call that? The short timers list, at least mentally, because I'll be leaving for Hawaii on next Wednesday. Super excited to be doing that with my mom and my kids and their significant others and my husband. So we're planning to do everything from the volcanoes to snorkeling. I heard a rumor that there's possible snowboarding. If there's an option for that, we'll definitely be doing that as well. So again, I'm on the final countdown here, 1 week away.
Wow, nice.
Thanks for having me.
I'm jealous already of all the vacations, and that's perfect. Thank you, Ronnie. I guess I should quickly mention that I'm one of the co-founders of Cast.app, and then we are laser focused on scaling customer success and revenue expansion using automation, especially for accounts that do not have named CSMs. And our use cases range from digital business reviews to a sophisticated end-to-end automation engine. The most fun activity would be taking my dog Electra, a 100-pound lab, to Fort Funston in San Francisco, which is an off-leash beach with my family. And we had a board meeting yesterday, and our one of the board members said oh, we need to take vacations. So I'm headed to Tahoe during the Christmas and New Year's break, and then in summer I'm going to go to Italy. So there you go. So should we get started? Unleash all this brain power?
Get at it.
Let's go. So here's a thought for you. And I've mentioned this on our posts also. Have you ever walked out of Costco with just milk and eggs? And why are they kind of located at the farthest section of the warehouse? And why is Costco still selling a 16-inch pizza for just $9.95? So milk, eggs, and pizza are loss leaders for Costco. They bring people like us into the store. So a loss leader strategy involves selling specific products or services at a loss or zero profit, and I'll explain the difference shortly, and expecting customers to purchase other items at the regular price or higher price. So with that in mind, Ram, can customer success be a successful loss leader?
Thanks, Dicky. I appreciate it. So I think this is a really controversial topic when you think about it, and it can be set up in different ways. So I'll caveat it by basically saying it depends on the size of your organization, right? Let me come at it from a early stage organization where I do believe that customer success can be a loss leader. So think about product-led growth, or think about free trials or a low-tiered plan. Usually in smaller organizations that are just starting out, you're still trying to find your way, right? You haven't found your full market fit. And the customer success manager, by by nature is a jack of all trades at that stage of an organization. I'm not saying that's the right way to be, but oftentimes in organizations you find that. So think about if you have a free product or a low tiered model and you want to help folks convert. You're often going to use customer success or someone who really knows the product, understands the use cases, can talk with your internal product folks, lend a hand in that relationship. In that case, I do believe that customer success can be a loss leader because in the future, you're going to recoup the costs after they convert, after the product takes off, after they bring in, get outside of a trial and move to a different tier. So I definitely believe that it can be a loss leader early on in organizations.
Anyone else? Amelia, Jeff, Ronnie?
Well, I'll jump in and just say that I do agree with Graham, and I think that there is a lot to be said about the impact or the implication of where you are, the maturity of your organization, and even really what your product or your service is. I think today I would suspect that there's quite a few organizations out there that don't realize that they're utilizing customer success as a loss leader, and that's something that maybe we should be paying more attention to in our community and in our profession.
I have a little bit of a different view. While I completely understand that companies will do that, I think that you're setting up a company potentially in the wrong direction. I was on a call at 6 a.m. this morning with my CSM, who I was introduced to, and fairly new company. And she said, we can meet every day, every week, once a month. How often would you like to meet? And so basically she was telling me that she would help me set up this application and be at pretty much my beckoning call as I liked. And I just thought, wow, this is just such a terrible strategy for this company. I wanted to start advising her on not to do that, but I held back. And what's so interesting is they have this incredible marketing strategy with all of these emails coming, quick videos that I can watch, whatever, so I can get myself up and running. Why in the world is she offering me all of this free service? If there's automation like Cast App or other things, why wouldn't you leverage a product or a way to enable your customers without having them to be on a call with a human, a CSM? The other thing I'll say is I feel like it devalues your product, and that to me is a problem. You're setting up your customers where they're starting to assume or make assumptions. Anytime I've set up a professional services team or started charging for it, it's almost like a mental game. People start valuing it more. They come more prepared to the meeting, and there's an agenda and they want to get through their items. So I'm not 100% on board as having a customer success team as a loss leader.
I'll take it a little bit further. Loss leader is a well, we'll get controversial. It's a false analogy. It's the nomenclature is off. If you want to call it cost of goods sold and then continue monitoring that cost over lifetime value and the other metrics in your company, lowering CAC and lowering overhead to support, then I'm all for it. But that whole term, which I'm not going to say again in this meeting, is just it's all in the wrong direction. And so that pizza was a one-time purchase. It doesn't hang around and drive value with the rest of the purchases in the cart at Costco. And so, and that terminology comes from market basket analysis days when we were doing BI a long time ago. So it's just so far off. If you want to get actionable about it, connect your retention both to duration of time with those customers that you apply customer success managers and CS ops engagement with, and then the dollars amounts over time. And then we can have more fruitful discussion about how it is. And also, if you use that term, it also means that you're using customer success in the pre-sales motion as a value add to close the product-led sale or whatever else you're calling it. And so the value prop is automatically upfront with that. And so that's where I'll stake my flag.
I definitely agree with both Amelia and Jeff on that. I'm thinking about it from my perspective, right, where you don't have marketing dollars, you don't have the collateral for, the real self-serve, right? Or maybe you're not even worried about retention because you don't know who your target audience is really at that time, right? If you're really an early stage organization. So I respect and do see that the value of not using the CSM, but at times I think that's the only opportunity some organizations have, right or wrong.
No, totally agree with you. And so if we're using customer success to feed product into marketing, then we should get some of their budget.
That's a great, I agree with that.
That makes so much sense. So we always say that the cost of customer success kind of pays for itself, at least for accounts with a large ARPA. So, the age-old question, which we've already started talking about, should we charge for customer success? And I hear, right, at least 2 points, right? Oh, yes, we can charge as a line item because people value that more. Or some people argue hey, it brings in the customer adoption, or it brings in the retention. Why should you charge for something? Just build it into the cost of the MRR, right? So whether you charge as an explicit line item or build it into the cost into the cost of of customer success in MRR, right? So those are two thoughts, and again, we are talking about it being a loss leader. So what are your thoughts around that?
I'll start by saying, I think you have to differentiate if you're talking about the cost for a SaaS model or a B2C, because they're two completely different things. Just like NPS was created for the B2C model, but now every board member wants to know what the NPS score of a B2B company is. It doesn't always equate equally because they're different experiences. And I do believe that as the profession of customer success matures and companies demand more from their vendors and the experience they want to have with a product, they're more willing to pay for it. And I see this firsthand as a consultant. I am working with a company selecting a customer success, whatever, tool, technology, whatever. They are over and over willing to pay for someone to help them onboard, to have a dedicated customer success manager. And the companies that don't offer a premium service, they're not even interested in pursuing the conversation because they don't have enough resources. They want that concierge premium experience. And so that's why I very much believe we should charge for customer success, because as you mature in your model, you're going to naturally want to get more enterprise customers in most cases. So you'll want to have those models for those customers.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Amelia, but I guess my question back to you would be, so we all know that somewhere along the way, customer success is being paid for, right? Even if it's baked into the MRR or whatever. Do you feel that making it more transparent gives it more value, gives it more, clout, if you will? And is it something you think that we should be doing out of the gate? So I guess for me, just my point around that is, I come in and I buy your essential or your flagship product, but I am exposed to your peripherals. And as a company, I'm getting, exposure to data and, maybe expansion. But I feel like when it's all baked into the MRR, how is that measured? How do you do that? So I'm agreeing with you that I love the idea of premium success and that kind of thing, but out of the gate, I think it is a little hard for people kind of to wrap their head around.
I think the best example, and I'd love to hear from Graham and Jeff as well, but if you look at the Hubspot model, they force you to go through onboarding. You're paying for it. They openly tell you that, or you can use a third party. If you go through a third party, they're waiving the price because you're going to pay the third party to onboard. And then from there, you can decide, do you want to buy 10 hours of CS a month from us, or from a company who is certified in this? They're very transparent, and they allow you to decide, are you going to have a operations manager to manage HubSpot, or are you going to have a CSM on our side to help you? And I really like that because it's just upfront, early on, it's exposed during the sales process, and then you can better forecast, you can better decide, make better decisions. And if you're educating the customer along the way, they can't be 6 months into the contract and say your product doesn't work, and then they're blaming it on the product because they chose not to get a CSM. So I believe it's all about education. And then if the customer realizes the value, you're not even selling it to them. You're showing them how a CSM will enable them and their success if they don't have those internal resources.
Yeah, I'll step in here and be the great unifier for a moment. I like where Graham initially started us off with, and really utilizing customer success as a growth engine internally and feedback loops. And Amelia took it all the way to, we're positioning it as the value and thus the cost. And then Ronnie comes through with, well, maybe there's possibly a middle ground, right? So things that I've done in the past, if we start with a very small product-led group that's going SMB and mid-market, then over time, we go upstream and we go up market towards enterprise models. And then we have cost of goods sold with customer success management. We have the opportunity to measure cohorts that either have and are utilizing our services where those touch points are, drive value and measure value, where the touch points in the customer journey maps with customer success engage and what the differentials are. And so then we relating value in MRR increase or ARR increase over time. And then as we become that enterprise facing organization, twice I've built quasi PS, pay for play CS services inside of the customer success organization itself, owned by customer success. And so those pay for play services are shelfware. Do you want onboarding services at scale? Do you are looking for churn mitigation, whatever it is the organization is looking at, and then applying that to an additional to pay cost. So you have the a la carte that comes with, and then you can tier these with plans and such. But as you mature as an organization, it doesn't have to be binary where it's baked in or it's a service. It could be, well, we have our customer success service, and then we have a la carte for maybe you're expanding yourself and you want additional onboarding, et cetera. So there are other ways to do that as well.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. And I wrote the note. I've done that model before too, under the quasi services and stepped up packages and things like that. The one thing I would caution folks who are looking at that is, you have to make sure that the customer or the prospect understands that customer success is not support, right? And I think oftentimes it gets blended in, and that's where you're in a hole, where you're in trouble as you try to scale from day one. And I think that's a little bit about what I think, Amelia, you were touching on briefly was, customer success is not that support. They're the proactive, they're the shaking hands, they really are the pulse of the relationship. They have resources behind them. When you get a CSM, and I've been guilty of this too in organizations I've built, in the reactive support model, it's a very difficult hole to get out of.
Well, exactly. And then when you begin the customer success engagement life cycle with your customer, you have deliverables just as you would in a PS org. Here's our letter of intent. This is our letter of engagement, whatever you want to use as a formality. And then you're always driving to partnership. And I think that's what Amelia was also alluding to, is that we're driving to a partnership where our organization, this is not a vendor services org relationship with a customer. We're driving to a partnership, measurable outcomes, results, et cetera. And these are detailed, and there's going to be ownership across the board.
And talking about, like you mentioned, professional services, there is a question from the audience. It's from an anonymous attendee. So it could be one of our competitors, or just kidding. So once you start charging for customer success, how do you differentiate from professional services, or more specifically, advisory style services? Jeff, you want to take that? You were talking about professional services.
Yeah, it's all in outlining the deliverables. So, and that's one of the things that customer success I see growing into more and more is away from widget and and technical, or actually deeper technical advisory, but also advise me in my vertical. So if we're a heavy telco play, or we're CPG or oil and gas, et cetera, then do you have individuals on your staff that can help to drive me towards what's going on in my industry with your application, driving me values there? So that's very specific. And so when in the question again, driving to those, what are our timeframes? What are deliverables? What metrics are we adhering ourselves to? There's also a place in the world that this isn't just standard pay for play, but there also could be an upfront and then a variable attached on the back end as it relates to results that your customer receives over time. And that can become very profitable for both you and your customer. And it's again, driving to that partnership and away from the standard service organization model.
Yeah, and I think professional services oftentimes too has a beginning and an end, whereas the customer success manager relationship is ideally an infinity, right? So we're driving value back into the business and helping to expand and so forth. So that would be my that would be how I would differentiate.
And if it has a beginning and an end, it also has a renewal opportunity.
True that. Ideally.
That makes a lot of sense. The only relationship that kind of stays is the customer success relationship, and then you kind of bring in experts, or bring in like maybe the onboarding people or some of the experts, or so even bring in an account manager for upsells if the organization is like set up that particular way. But like also, as you know, there's a huge trend of making products like a lot easier to use, like over time. And so look at the digital adoption platforms, for example, like, a lot of shift happening to adopt at least the users of the system digitally, like people who use the product. The jury is still out, like how do you bring adoption to the people who are paying for it, which is like the non-users, that's separate. But let's talk about like the users of the product, like, digital adoption and all this. And I think, Amelia, you have a background in the company and all that I'm talking about. You want to take that?
Yeah, I do love the idea of having real-time guidance through a product. If you think of any training you've ever been through, I'll use the T-Mobile experience. To become a customer success or a customer support manager, you go through 3 months of training. Imagine when you finally start using your support education that you learned on day 1 or day 5 in month 4. What are you going to remember? Probably not a lot, because we're humans and we forget the majority of anything we learn unless we're practicing that mental muscle on a daily cadence. So being able to have real-time guidance through an application when you need it. I just think of Salesforce trying to close an opportunity and remembering, like, what am I supposed to be filling in? Or if you've ever used Workday, it's a challenge. So having real-time guidance through the platform when you need it, it might be 9 or 10 at night. You've got a deadline. No one's open. Like you don't have guidance. Being able to have someone in the product in real time is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add some real stats from, and I'll change the names to protect the innocent, but the stats ultimately are on a SaaS subscription monthly, without CSMs, average tenure of 6 months. CSM-led engagements, 18 months, right? So that's a real testament to the onboarding that we talked about, the confidence that someone's got your back, that's thinking about the relationship, that's advocating for you within, the vendor's relationship. So, I mean, look, that's just one organization, but I mean, it's what is, if my math is on, that's 3 to 1 in terms of, months sticking around with a CSM on the engagement. And take that to the enterprise level, and I think those numbers are probably pretty close as well.
Yeah, and I think it does come down to those options, right? It comes down, we've talked about a variety of ways to approach that, but I think that having the option, like Amelia, you were talking about the person who's onboarding you, they're the CSM, and they've basically, laid themselves down as your doormat, right? But the reality is that they likely have, depending again on the maturity of their company, they likely have many other resources that you could rely on to become successful in their product. But people do like to have what I call their whoobie. CSMs are often customers' whoobies, and they want to be able to, they want to be able to call you, touch you, feel you, and, know that you're there for them. But obviously that's not scalable. So I think that's a good point that you make, Graham. I like those statistics, of course, and I agree with them. But I do think that you have to have that more. Some people are, prefer to learn on their own or whatever. And then one other point I want to make about the T-Mobile comment, Amelia, is so important with, I don't know the stats on this, but I know they're crazy. From a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the rate at which we are deploying technology and changes to our technology is, exponential. And that day 1, day 5, or even day 90, you hit day 95, you could be dealing with a completely different product, right, than you walked into. And when you translate that to the customer experience, it's even, right, they're not living it all day, every day, and you're one of many vendors potentially. Well, you are. That's such an important point that you make. I think that's something that we all need to be thinking about as CS practitioners.
Go ahead, Graham.
No, I was just going to say, because I think there was a question about, content, right? And I think it's super important that as your product is evolving, if people aren't in there every day, right? Some tools we're in every day, some we're in every other day, some you're in once a month, depending on what the cycle of your business is. But making sure that your education, your documentation is being kept up to date, so folks know, when they sit down and they carve out those 2 hours to get into your system, that it's not going to be completely changed, right? Because then that's when you get support issues, that's when you get panic calls. So I think the education aspect, and I don't want to get too far into it, is also something that needs to be woven within this as well.
Yeah, that question was from Stella. I think she said, how can CS teams create more content that provides customers with options of synchronous and asynchronous resources? So thank you. While we are on the question, there's another question. We have kind of answered this already. It's from Jaspreet Walia. And the question is, and this is kind of focused on product-based SaaS companies, which is also like CAS, right? Should a product-based SaaS company be charging for service or support provided to B2B companies apart from the product usage cost? I think we have kind of covered it, but if anyone wants to take another stab at it, we can move on to the next questions.
I'll just say, if you want to scale and you're growing quickly, I love using examples. I think of the Zendesk experience, implementing it several times for clients. They either pay after onboarding and they get a dedicated CSM, or they do the cheaper route where they have to sign up and they get 30 minutes. It's once a week where there's sign up times. And I think that's a scalable way, because really, not only is the product fairly intuitive, but there's a ton of knowledge out there where you can just watch quick videos or, read a knowledge base, look at images and figure out the product. So it's kind of forcing people to not be lazy in an easy way to say it.
Yeah, you're also seeing the rise of communities around some of these products, right? And that's, people do try to be lazy, and then they end up going and realize other people have, and they either help themselves out or they end up paying in the after the fact. So it is an interesting dilemma of when do you pay, or do you try to force through on your own?
I'm gonna work in here on that omni-channel aspect, but first I'm going to give a communal hug to my panelists here, particularly Graham and Ronnie, who brought up the human aspect and human first aspect of customer success. We immediately commoditize this and calling it that double L phrase, and that there's something to be said for providing customer the right time, right cadence with an actual knowledgeable, talented individual. That being said, there's also what we've all just touched on, the asynchronous and meeting the right learner and consumer and user at the right time with the right message and the right data and at the right modality. So you have textual learners, you have video learners, you have hands-on in-app. We talked about adoption software, and then community, which this is a whole nother topic, but community should be owned by customer success, not by marketing. And so you have all of those omni channels that should be owned by your CS ops and your CS organization. And to answer the more detailed question, all of those are ripe for repurposing content and using technologies to bring you the transcripts and then repurpose those using blogs, video, shortening what we're doing here into 2-minute or 90-second clips, and then putting those out in a video academy, and having all these different channels that can be used and updated and owned by customer success across the board, so that you have customer success enablement for your users and your consumer population at scale.
Thank you. So, so I wanted to ask the same question in the context of like very young startups, right? Like with the loss leader thing. So comparing it again to the physical world, right? The loss leader strategy is, is known to like increase sales by bringing in more traffic to the stores, but it also helps a new company like wedge a foothold in an established market, right? So how should startups be thinking about this? Obviously, they're trying to do product market fit, they're trying to like establish a foothold, they're trying to like get new customers to use their product, and should they be thinking about like charging for adoption and retention early on, or should they use that again as a loss leader, bring customers in, and think of like high growth startups, think of like startups with lots of customers when you answer that question?
Let's use Zoom, since Ronnie's from Zoom. I have a corporate account, we pay for Zoom, and I've never talked to a human before, because every time I have a challenge or a question, there's a little chat bot, and I type in my query, and then suddenly this amazing video comes up that I can look at on one screen while I'm, figuring things out on the other. And honestly, if you think about the workforce right now, I read this stat that there are about 5 generations working right now. And based on the generation and your experience with technology, you may not want to talk to a human. You may not want to wait a week to talk to a CSM to schedule a call. You just want your query addressed, or you want to work on something now or start a new project. And so while that might be support that I put in chat, that's often what CSMs end up becoming for customers. So for young or early stage companies, my advice is invest in technology, put process in place and invest in technology so your CSMs aren't firefighting, and instead they are actually having conversations that matter, and things like technology can help them with the simple things.
Thank you. That makes so much sense. So you don't text Ronnie if you have a question, like,
No,
Okay.
no, that wouldn't be fair.
Look, I think we all agree that customer success is one of those things that's oftentimes undervalued, right? I mean, we go back and talk about, fighting for a seat in the boardroom. We talk about fighting for a seat within the organization. The reality is that there's no more valuable part of the organization than customer success. And I believe we're all biased about that, but I do think that customer success plays many roles in an organization. And it does appear to be, when I talk with a lot of my peers, that it's undervalued, right? So how do you bring that value in early and often and get that, recoup those dollars that you're often giving away early?
So that's a beautiful point. And as a CS practitioner, if I hear that, then that's my fault. If I'm not promoting the triumphs, the victories of my team, that's my fault. If I'm not letting the entire company know the MRR that we've uncovered and are returning to the organization, that's my fault. And so I go back to that. If our company is and our investors are willing to buy market share to get into the market, then they are going to take the budget and they're going to allocate CS dollars just as they will anywhere else to buy developers, to buy market share, to guerrilla market. and we're going to get some of those dollars too. So that question, it falls to me. I park my chair outside my CFO's office and say, where are the dollars going? If you want to spend X amount of percent of dollars on marketing in order to get to, top of funnel activities and what those acquisition and those conversion rates are, I can show you about what the modern SaaS, it's $1.63 to buy a customer, and to retain it's about 37. And so I can bring back 4 to 5 more customers on each of those dollars if we do some CS ops work in the background and some analytics with BI. So.
Yeah, and that's all of those points are exactly why baking CS into your MRR is I don't want to say dangerous, but it's a little erroneous, or can be.
So that brings up another question, like, so should we be assigning CSMs to users and accounts who use your product for free? Like, a lot of products allow usage for free. And I want you to answer in the context of, like a lot of people offer 30-day free trials, and some people like us offer like a freemium product, like, you can up to 10 accounts, you can use it for free forever. So would you assign a CSM to a free account? And what are your thoughts around that?
I'll raise my hand here because I am guilty of this. Sometimes I don't feel good about it, but I do believe that there are high valued accounts. There are products that haven't quite evolved yet that need, just because the CSM understands both sides, the organization and the customer. I have assigned a CSM in previous organizations to free accounts, whether it's a trial, whether it was an investor that we wanted to give to, right? So there are some circumstances where I think it's okay. Now, with that being said, I'll talk out of the other side of my mouth. I don't think it's a sustainable thing, right? So it really has to be something that you evaluate. Does it benefit your organization early, right? So if you're a small company, is it worth doing? And can you make sure that you don't go down that rabbit hole where you're constantly doing that? Because as we've talked about before, that's just not sustainable, and that's not good business practice.
Yeah, I believe that should be a sales job. Hire a sales engineer. I've worked with too many companies now where they put CSMs on that 30-day free trial. Then there's a blame game of why the deal didn't close. And then the CSM is just so overwhelmed with trying to onboard or renew a customer, plus trying to help the salesperson sell. I mean, you're not asking sales to do CS work. Why are you asking CS to do sales work? It's I believe, the wrong strategy, and you should leave that to the sales team to manage.
That's perfect. That's amazing, Amelia, because I do see like salespeople, CSMs being pulled into post-sales and being pulled into like pre-sales and all sorts of things. But having like a sales engineer do the sales work, and that makes a lot of sense. Ronnie, you had some thoughts around this as well.
Sorry, trying to glance at my notes because I feel like I've changed my mind about a bunch of things in the last 45 minutes.
Wow, that's amazing.
No, but I think Amelia makes a very good point. I think that as long as you are, working with your prospects or even customers on expansion, as long as they understand that they're going to encounter different SMEs along their journey, right? An SE or a technical account manager, their CSM, that kind of thing. And that's promoted in the pre-sale motion. Then I think customers are a lot more going to be a lot more receptive to that. And even though I agree with Graham to some degree, I also do think that if you don't want to set the wrong expectations, and by assigning a CSM early on, you may do that. But again, as we talked about, if you're talking very early stage, people are wearing all of those, could potentially wearing all of those hats. So you have to be really, really smart about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree, right? Again, I don't mean to talk out both sides, but I think by nature, someone that gravitates towards a CSM role wants success of the organization, and that's where they often get in over their heads, and that's, they raise their hand, they volunteer if there's a budget constraint, right? It's easy to go out and hire a sales engineer if you have the budget. Oftentimes, people aren't even thinking about all the roles that they need or will need in year 2 or month 18. And I think that's where you often see CSMs get put in a bad position where they raise their hand because they want it to succeed. That's the nature in their DNA. And I guess the jury's still out if that's the best way to go to make things work.
I don't think you're speaking at both sides of your mouth, Graham, at all. It's in very nuanced position, right? So I think there's 3 ways that can be answered. In the trial to pay scenario, where you have the freemium and 30 days, boom, absolutely, Amelia's right. That's a trial to pay. That is a sales, and that's a trial to pay to conversion model. In the free product, it matters what your product vision looks like. Are we doing PLG, where we need customer success managers to help the customer navigate what we have as a roadmap, 96 months, 9 months, 12, 18, 118 out? So you need a CSM who can be trusted in guiding the customer through that journey, and that's going to be appropriate. Well, and then the third part is renewals, right? So if we have customer success managers that are tasked with the renewal event, then that is where they play as well. I don't care who you put where, but when those events occur, when the trial needs to be converted to pay, when the renewal's up, or you're doing PLG, every one of those moments and the individuals and the team that's matched those moments must be measured in that moment. What was a percentage of conversion? How many of our customers renewed? What level of plans and products are being up and cross sold, and by whom? And then we will be able to work out the numbers and the contribution from teams, and then of course the compensation for those activities. And so mapping, and then it goes all the way back to customer journey map. And at the moment of engagement, what is the activity rate that we're measuring?
Here's an interesting question from Melissa King. She asks, one of our core value propositions is our customer success support is already baked into the subscription model. And how do you back out of that? How do you break it out? Essentially, do you charge for specific services going forward at a premium price, or how do you? So that I think that's a great question.
I'll jump in here. This is a very popular one. As all of our friends and colleagues in customer success in our organizations mature, the first thing is just to be honest about it. Right? We have matured as an organization. We have changed the way that we're going to market, and as such, we are changing our model. We're a company. We're allowed to evolve. We're allowed to change, and at the term of the subscription, we're going to change the next terms. So that's one angle. The second one is for customers that have they've graduated out of customer success in the relationship. So that's advantageous for them. It's advantageous for your organization. You can move them strictly to the asynchronous model. They can get right time, right data, right value at the moment that they need it through your asynchronous channels and all of the customer ops driven enablement that lives out there. And so there's a lot of different ways but just because you did one thing one day doesn't mean you can't change that at an appropriate time, whether at the renewal event or an annual event. But then get in front of that, lead with messaging, lead with a timeline, work with marketing and message, and all things change over time. That's the only constant. So
Oliver wants to ask, is product solution training as part of onboarding, should you be charging for that? Amelia, you want to take that?
Well, I mean, I do like the model where they're given a certain amount of training hours or onboarding hours, and then having resources that are available on demand 24/7. And then anything beyond that, having them go through something that might be paid. I think it depends on how complex your product is, if there's certification involved. If you can gamify it, I think of the Salesforce journey through the forest. I can't remember what it's called, to get all the badges, or
Trailhead.
yeah, Trailhead or Gainsight has admin training where you do pay and then you get certified, but then you've got a certified administrator. So there, I think it depends on how complex your product is, how much you have on demand that they can go through on their own.
We have another question from Hakan, and he's asking, if a CS was a loss leader, how would you differentiate value of your product services versus competition, other than just pricing? Would you praise support services you offer instead, for example? Anyone?
Interesting question. I think it depends on why you're using CS as in that role, right? Is it you're trying to gain information, you're trying to figure out your product market fit? So is there another positive that your organization is getting out of this? So I don't know if it's necessarily praising support services for differentiation. Maybe that willingness to jump in is perceived by prospects and clients as the above and beyond. I don't know. I'd be curious if the panel has any other spin on it. That's a difficult one, actually.
And I would want to know about the SLA. Like, is it on demand 24/7? Is it, I think I'd need to dig a little bit deeper and understand. I would also question the quality.
Yeah, guardrails I think that's a great point that we're bringing up towards the end. If you are going to use it as the word that Jeff won't use, what are the guardrails that we're going to put around this, right? Because you don't want to be entering your phone at whatever time on a Saturday night because someone's in the system. So I think that's something that we should have discussed as well, is that there needs to be some operating rules if you're gonna put a CSM in that position for whatever reason, right or wrong.
And if we want to go back to Costco, I mean, I don't eat meat, and I think the cheese on that pizza is awful and definitely going to give you a heart attack. I want the vegan cheese. I want the organic dough, the fresh mozzarella or fresh sauce that's homemade in Sonoma. So the last thing I'm going to do is buy Costco pizza, but you kind of get what you pay for, right? So of course, they might want to use it as a loss leader, but you probably won't get the premium clients that you really want if that's what you're going to use. So you get what you pay for.
I think this is also an opportunity for customer testimonials and use cases that tell your story. This is a place where you can use metrics and show value over time that your customers receive at scale with services versus a cohort that does not take advantage. And so do that. But this is definitely a place where lookalike customers with their feedback is going to be more convincing and more helpful, just telling your story.
So there's another question by Jaspreet, and I'm going to generalize that, right? So what the question is like, how much inclined should a CSM be with support department when it comes to product-related issue? I've seen cases where CSMs get impacted because of the support tickets being delayed. So is it common? And I want to expand that, like not just support, like you need to talk to engineering, you need to talk to other departments, right? So what's the impact on CSM? Any thoughts around that?
I would do an analysis around how many tickets are coming in that are going to CSMs. And then can you set up an education program during onboarding where you educate your customers if this is a product or technical related issue post onboarding, this is how you get a hold of support. And then if it's more about your account or you want to talk about scaling or strategizing, I am your CSM. So it's educating your customer. I think that's really important. And when I was working in CS operations across 80 people, what we did is we said, all right, if customers email you for support, do not tell them to go to support. File the support ticket for them or forward it to support because we use Zendesk, and then CC them and put a sentence in there that says, I've filed a ticket for you, but in the future, you'll get support much faster on your technical question by emailing them directly. I'm CC'd automatically as your CSM. And then, you're educating them in a nice way. so that your CSMs aren't suddenly becoming support managers as well.
Yeah, but also like if you are having like weekly conversations, the CSMs are having weekly conversations, and then this customer keeps bringing up like, hey, I filed this support ticket or filed this idea or feature request like a while back, right? So how do you, so I think there is, because since the relationship is with the CSM, they will always get some sort of like impact, right? So I think it might also help in like saying, oh, this feature is going to take like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, setting the expectation correctly with the customer so that they don't ask every week. So they ask like after the 3 weeks or so.
It's interesting you bring that up, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but it's not always information that is, the organization doesn't often early on operate that way. But I do believe if you can get your organization, I've said this many times, there's 4 real answers to stuff like that. It's yes now, yes later, no never, and no not now. If you can arm your CSMs as an organization with one of those 4 answers, you diffuse a lot of tension, you diffuse a lot of conversation, and extra like, where are we with this? When you back yourself into it's 3 weeks, it's 2 weeks, I don't know, I'm waiting for product, that builds animosity. So if you can get your organization to give you one of those 4 answers on anything, whether it's business, whether it's product, marketing, you diffuse a whole bunch of additional conversations.
And then also supplement that like why we would not do this, right? So that's very useful. Like the same, like we deal with like teams, someone comes up with a really great suggestion, you accept it, or if you don't accept it, you have to kind of tell them like, why
Exactly.
you're accepting it. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So so I just wanted to ask about the negatives of loss leader, right? Like, so they have been known to like backfire in the physical and e-commerce world, right? For example, the $5 footlong for Subway, right? When that ended, the sales dropped because people started expecting like, the $5, and Millie and others have like kind of answered that also, but I wanted to like go further and like ask, what are some drawbacks of like offering it at a lower, offering the CS as a loss leader, or like, for example, comparing it to the $5 footlong, or also around like negative brand perception, or this is like a cheap company or so. Any thoughts around that?
I think I would just say that, you're not selling value with the deals, with the introductory pricing, with the discounting and all of that. And once you've rung that bell, it's pretty difficult to unring. So you have to be very careful, how and when you do that with respect to your CSMs. It's hard to sustain, hard to scale, and I would argue that's not, that type of selling is not value based.
Yeah, I mean, I see that happening with one-time purchases, like, I'm looking for XYZ and it's a one-time purchase. I will go shop till I find something like cheaper. But B2B or these are mostly like subscriptions, right? I'm looking for like long-term value. So maybe it does not apply that much or so, but yeah, what you're saying makes sense. Anything else? We're like almost on time, like a couple of minutes left. I think we've answered like 7 questions as well. I do have one question for like panelists, but before that, like, thank you so much for joining us. As I said, there's so much brain power. What would be like one takeaway for the audience that each of you would provide? It can be off topic, but but related to CS. Go for it.
I'll start by saying measure everything. If you can't measure it, it's really hard to show the success of a program. So show value if you're going to use this loss leader, which I don't recommend.
Ronnie?
I think my takeaway probably is everyone who's watching this or will watch this is that, there isn't one right or wrong answer. There's so many different variables that can impact how you play this. But I would, double click on what Amelia said. It's like, you get what you pay for. And so, be cognizant of that.
Thank you. Graham.
Yeah, I think, look, I can't say anything more than the measurement and the value. But I also think we've sort of touched on the topic of there's no one correct way to do customer success, right? Models evolve, organizations evolve, and are free to change their mind, as Jeff brought up. And I think, when folks are often trying to get into customer success, that they're looking for, and not to be cliche, but the playbook. And there are many playbooks depending on where your organization is, who your product market fit is. Are you going to pivot? And I think CS is a wonderful practice, and is, as everyone's talked about, is really a value driver and a revenue driver. It should be in every organization, but to be open-minded that there are different approaches to it. And I think that's key in my opinion.
And last but not the least, Jeff.
Yeah, it said here, by everyone, I believe, tie measurements and customer value to those exact touch points and moments of engagement in your customer journey map with your customer success professionals.
And then how can the audiences reach each of you if they had a question, or they wanted to know about your business, or any of those topics, for example?
I can jump in there. Grab any one of Dickie's posts. G and Gill at LinkedIn. I love it. I'm out there. I'd love to hear from anyone.
Yes, happy to connect on LinkedIn, or email me, amelia@growthmolecules.com.
Yep, LinkedIn's best for me.
Ditto that.
All right, so I think LinkedIn, and then emails, same for me. LinkedIn is perfect. Any questions about the product, any questions about this, feel free to send us. And thank you so much for joining, everyone, and the panelists. Thanks, Jeff, for stepping in at the last minute.
Anytime, my friend, you know that.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.